All right, welcome everybody. Let me get my slides up on the screen here so everyone knows they're in the right place. See here. Lindsay, you can see that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, terrific. So thank you everybody for being here. This is the third webinar in our spring webinar series. And it is Affordable Housing is Workforce Housing. I think this webinar has gotten the most interest of any webinar we've done so far. So we're very glad to have you here today. Just going to do a little bit of quick background about the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity in case you haven't been to one of our webinars. And then we're going to jump into the content and agenda for today. The Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity we're in our third year of operations now. And our mission is to coordinate a regional response to the housing affordability challenges in Litchfield County. We do that by working with all these folks, directly with municipalities, our regional council of governments, our legislators, our housing nonprofits, our cross-sector partners like our regional economic development group and our local economic development committees and commissions, anchor institutions like healthcare, arts and culture organizations, conservation organizations, faith-based communities, funding partners like Connecticut Department of Housing and CHAFA, LISC, and our local and regional community foundations are terrific partners as well. So again, working together, we can address our housing affordability challenges. But we can't do it in a siloed way. So that's our job, is to make sure everyone knows what their role is in this work and keep everybody rowing in the same direction. I like to show this slide because a lot of people don't know how much is actually happening either in their community or in communities around the region to create affordable housing options in Litchfield County. There are 18 affordable housing developments underway. They're in Barkhamsted, Cornwall, Falls Village, Goshen, Kent, Litchfield, Morris, Norfolk, Salisbury, Sharon, Warren, Washington, and Winchester. They are going to be providing affordable housing options. Sometimes they take longer than we all wish that they would, but we need all the folks in these communities to support these housing options. They are very much underway in our communities. So today, again, what we're going to talk about is sort of what is the difference between affordable housing and workforce housing. Spoiler alert, there is no difference. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about specifically what jobs in Litchfield County and across the state pay wages that would qualify those workers to live in affordable housing if we had more of it available for them. Julie Scharnberg is with us today. She's the Vice President of Community Engagement at the Northwest Connecticut Community Foundation. She's going to talk with us and share with us the ALICE data, and again, some more detailed data that they have, that the Northwest Connecticut Community Foundation has around the highest in demand jobs in our region, and again, how they pay, many of them pay wages that would require those folks to live in affordable housing. And will qualify them to live in affordable housing. And then Justin is here with us as well. Justin Potter is the president of Kent Affordable Housing, and he's going to talk with us a little bit about a collaboration happening right now in Kent between Kent Affordable Housing, Kent Volunteer Fire Department, and Kent employers, where they have surveyed both employees and employers about housing needs in the community, and how lack of affordable housing there is really impacting local small businesses, and again, the ability of folks who work in the community and could volunteer on the Kent Volunteer Fire Department because of the lack of affordable housing options there. And then we will have time for any questions, comments that people would like, anything people would like to talk about. So I'm going to just sort of kick us off here. This is a word cloud that I tried to create. But what I find in a lot of the communities that we work in is that at the beginning of the conversation, people really want to talk about what can we call this? We don't want to call it affordable housing. What can we call it so that everyone will just understand what we mean and rally around it? And I will tell you, unfortunately, there is no one word that will do that. And there's no shortcut to having the conversation in all of our communities about what we mean when we say affordable housing. And frankly, asking people what they mean when they say the words affordable housing. So we really do need to define what we mean when we talk about it, which is what I'm going to do next in terms of how I talk about this in my community and when I give presentations. And again, when I hear people say we're concerned about low income housing, I want to ask them, well, what do they mean by that? What is low income to them? And just have a conversation around what we mean. Again, I think this stems from the fact that a lot of folks have a picture that pops into their mind about what affordable housing looks like and who lives there. And they're not always accurate pictures or up-to-date pictures. And so we do need to show people what affordable housing looks like in our communities and also who lives there. And as many of you know, we have a couple short films that are on our website that many of you have watched, and you can share with your communities that show both what affordable housing looks like now in Litchfield County and also who lives in affordable housing. So this short film here, Housing Our Neighbors, interviews a lot of the folks that would live in affordable housing or do live in affordable housing. And it's another good way of having the conversation in our community instead of trying to figure out what to call it or how to call it something different that will make people support it. I think we just have to define it and continually have the conversation. And again, the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity has a lot of tools on our website for having that that conversation in your community, how to have it in a way that's effective and meaningful, but it has to be ongoing. And we got to, again, play the long game here for helping people understand what we mean when we talk about affordable housing. So I'm going to define it first. And many of you have seen this slide 1,000 times, but if your household pays less than 30% of your household income on your housing costs, you live in affordable housing. Just so you know, that's lowercase a, lowercase h affordable housing. It is most challenging for households that earn less than 80% of the area median income to find housing that only costs them 30% or less of their income. And so most state and federal programs are focused on creating housing options that are affordable to folks at or below that income level. In every town in Litchfield County, there are a significant number of households that earn below 80% of the area median income now, and that would qualify to live in affordable housing if we had more of it available to them. Because we don't, a lot of households in our communities are paying fully half of their income on housing costs. And as you can imagine, if you're paying half of your income on housing costs, there's just not enough of your money left over at the end of the month to pay for healthcare, food, clothes, transportation, everything else that you have to pay for to get by, let alone any saving for the future, or being able to deal with emergencies as they come up. So we did just launch, some of you came to our last webinar, we launched a new housing needs toolkit, data toolkit. That's a website where you can go look at how many of your households are paying fully half of their income on housing costs and a lot of other data. I'll give you a link to our website at the end here. If you haven't seen that, you can find it on our website. But again, every town in Litchfield County has a significant number of folks that would do qualify to live in affordable housing and could do so if we had more of those options available. We have countywide over 31,000 households that earn under 80% of the area median income, but we only have 4,686 housing units that are dedicated to remaining affordable to those households. And many of those dedicated units are restricted to seniors or disabled residents only. So they are not available for folks who are working full-time in our workforce. And so that is the challenge that we have.
Jocelyn, before you leave this slide, a couple questions came in that it might be helpful to address now, clarifying what is included in housing costs. So that's beyond rent and mortgage, right?
Sure. Again, anything that, your utilities are included, so heating your home, and insurance, taxes, all of that, property taxes, those are all included in housing costs.
And I don't know if you're seeing these. The one other question is if that 30% of income or the average median AMI refers to pre-tax or after tax.
That is after tax. Yeah. All right. So now we're going to define workforce housing. And I actually went to Wikipedia. So this is there if you want to reference it. So workforce housing is sort of affordable housing is, again, it's sort of a generic term, and specifically workforce housing is understood to mean affordable housing for folks with earned income that is insufficient to secure quality housing in reasonable proximity to their workplace. This could be rental housing, it could be ownership housing, but importantly, a lot of times people don't understand that, so this is a group of people that are not typically understood to be the target of affordable housing programs. However, as we're going to talk about next, many of the folks in our region who are earning incomes here earn below 80% of the area median income and need housing, affordable housing. And so, again, this is sort of a misconception that the affordable housing that we have isn't for folks who work or isn't, is only for seniors. Much of the affordable housing that we're trying to create now would be available for the workforce. And again, just drilling down a little bit more, workforce housing is commonly targeted for essential workers like police officers, firemen, teachers, nurses, medical personnel. And we do in our communities have a great number of lower paying service jobs. Again, Julie's going to talk more specifically about what some of those are. Those are the jobs that are open right now in our communities. And again, they don't pay enough for folks to be able to afford the rents or the mortgages now in our towns. A little history that's on this slide that I think is interesting. This term sort of came about in the 70s in a couple ski towns in Colorado, where again, the local workforce that were serving the folks who were coming to ski could not compete with the folks who were coming to ski from New York City or Hollywood or wherever they were coming from. they couldn't compete for the same stock of housing. And so this is happening also in many communities in Litchfield County where the workforce, the essential workers, can't compete with the folks that are looking for second homes or weekend homes here in our beautiful part of the state. They can't compete for the same housing stock as those folks. So we're going to talk about the wages of folks, again, who would qualify to live in affordable housing. The average annual wage for jobs in all sectors of employment in Litchfield County would qualify that worker to live in affordable housing. So again, the income limit for a single person at 80% of the area median income is a little bit more than $64,000. The average annual wage of all industries in Litchfield County is $57,000. So again, if you're a single income earning household, you would qualify to live in affordable housing. Certainly, if you're a single income earning household and you have a dependent, so if you're a single mom or single dad with a child or two children, you would most definitely qualify to live in affordable housing. There are also some of the largest sectors of jobs in Litchfield County, like healthcare and social assistance, retail, and administration and support, and government is kind of on the edge there. All of those jobs in those larger sectors, the workers earn under 80% of the area median income. And again, as I mentioned before, our workforce is competing with second homeowners in a lot of our communities who are bringing their incomes from higher income earning areas like New York. We're competing for the same limited supply of housing. This chart here is an example. This is in Cornwall. This is from our recently launched housing needs assessment tool. And in Cornwall, almost 33% of the homes are lived in or occupied by second homeowners. So those homes are not available for year-round occupancy. And again, those folks are bringing their buying power, because they earn incomes in higher income earning areas, and they're competing for that housing with our workforce. We have a lot of quotes from local businesses about the importance of affordable housing and how they need it for their employees. This one here from the former CEO of Gear Village, a retirement community in North Canaan. He says, again, in my mind, affordable housing is workforce housing. There's also quotes here from our local Apple computer store, the White Hart Inn, the Sharon Hospital, and a local bank, again, about how difficult it is for them to attract and retain employees when the cost of housing in our towns are so high. These are all in our playbook and toolkit for building community support for affordable housing. Those are also on our website. But again, talking with specific folks and employers in your community, we'll hear later about how Justin has done that in Kent. You will hear this kind of sentiment from those employers about how important it is to have affordable housing that's available to their employees. This is actually the statewide data, statewide housing wage. This is from Partnership for Strong Communities. And you can see here that there are many occupations that earn less than what they would need to earn to afford a one-bedroom apartment, and others that also, and many also that earn less than what they would need to afford the average two-bedroom apartment. This is statewide data. We know that there is a limited amount of rental housing stock anyway in Litchfield County towns, and the rents are even higher in a lot of cases here than they are in other parts of the state. But again, this data is available from the Partnership for Strong Communities, and I thought this was interesting fact as well, that anyone making minimum wage would have to work 96 hours a week in order to afford rent in it for a 2-bedroom rental home. So that's obviously not a sustainable situation to be in. This is just one slide, and then we're going to get on to Julie very quickly. This is actually from the webinar we did on short-term rentals, but again, to sort of underscore the limited supply of rental housing that's available for any workers, people that live year-round in our communities. This is Salisbury, Connecticut. About 4 weeks ago, I looked at realtor.com and looked at kind of what is available for rent in Salisbury, where I live. There were 27 results. Only 2 of them were available year-round. The rest were basically seasonal rentals that were only available in the summer or the winter. Again, if you work at the White Hart or at the bank, they need you to work 12 months a year. Like, you can't just work there in the summer or the winter. And the 2 that were available year-round were $4,500 a month and $5,900 a month. That's obviously not going to be affordable for many of our essential workers. And we also know, and again, feel free to go back to our webinar about short-term rentals and how they impact our housing stock, but there were 33 homes available for short-term rental in Salisbury when I looked that day. And again, those are not available for folks who work here year-round. They're only available short-term. So a lot of impacts on our housing stock from short-term and seasonal rentals. All right, so enough of me. Julie, if you could talk a little bit about this ALICE data, that would be terrific.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. As the slide says, meet Alice. That's the little catchphrase from the United Way. The United Way devised this as a way nationwide to try to look at costs versus the cost of living versus wages, just to see, because I think we're all familiar with the phenomenon of where the federal poverty limit is set quite often. The gap between that number and the cost of living can be quite different in a lot of regions. Litchfield County is no exception. The cost of living is a far cry from the federal poverty limit. So people who meet the federal poverty limit and can qualify for benefits like food assistance, housing assistance, a lot of times utility assistance, for example, even though it can be a multiple of the federal poverty limit, for example, 185%, it still leaves a really big universe of people that are caught in the middle, literally caught in this middle where they're always making trade-offs. It's like a 2 out of 3 thing. What can I delay? What unexpected thing is going to throw my household budget out of whack? It's basically ends up being a zero-sum game. We are not alone. As you look at the towns here and the percentage of households below the ALICE threshold, nationwide, 42% of households are below the ALICE threshold. So what we're looking at here is Torrington, Winstead, and North Canaan are above the national average. Canaan is just about there at 41%. So we have a significant number of households who always have a strain on their household budget. Between 2021 and 2022, the number of ALICE households increased, and this is continuing a decade-long trend in the growth of this population. Next slide, please. We now are at a $15.69 minimum wage in Connecticut. And I know the map on the previous page represented the United Way territory for this region, but basically when I'm going to talk about some of the numbers going forward, it'll be including Cornwall, Kent, Washington, and Bethlehem. The Northwest Connecticut Community Foundation covers 20 towns in Northwest Connecticut. It's pretty close to the COG geography. And those are the numbers that I look at very closely in terms of trying to keep track of what's impacting residents in this region. So as you can see from these household survival budgets, I mean, this is it. You don't get to save for retirement. You don't get to save for education. You can't upskill, go to the community college, for example, on to try to get a certificate program or an associate's degree. This is the bare bones budget, and the numbers, as you can see, fall down to an hourly wage, the single adult, $18.46, the full-time hourly wage up above that's highlighted, before tax credits kick in, $15.62. So that is just about at our minimum wage right now here in Connecticut. However, what about the seniors and the disabled, people on fixed incomes? The cost of living adjustments kind of are few and far between, and they just don't keep up. So how do you deal with this balancing act? So one thing you've got your inputs, your wages, but even though minimum wage has increased in a lot of states, for example, like Connecticut, it hasn't kept up with the cost of living. And so the other thing you can do is try to decrease expenses, obviously, but with the current level of inflation, that has become harder and harder to do. So where can we intentionally try to decrease or moderate costs for people? And it really does come down to, can we impact the cost of housing? And we can, if you look at the affordable housing developments that are going forward in this region. A lot of those rental and or homeowner projects are trying to do just that. And I'm looking at the level of inflation. I know that for building, for example, the cost of lumber, and it just the one thing I'm familiar with, even though it skyrocketed during COVID, it is still, and it has moderated somewhat, it is still higher than the cost of lumber in 2019. And the cost of building and renovating all of these projects, some of them are new builds, some of them are renovating existing buildings. The cost is really expensive, and it's getting more and more difficult to figure out how to make sure that these projects can go forward, given the level of inflation. So back to the survival budget, it's just looking at the input side. Okay, how do you get a better job? Well, the Community Foundation is updating its demographic report that we put out in 2017, and here's a sneak peek. In this latest draft that will be coming out in the next few months, I was looking at the in-demand occupations in preparation for this webinar. And what you see is a lot of lower wage jobs, 57 forecast as high demand. But the salaries and the hourly wages just don't cut it to support the cost, the basic household survival budget. I know we're looking at this hourly wage of $23.38 needed. That's what you'll get as a construction labor. But when you look at the cost of what a family has to come up with, 2 adults, an infant, and a preschooler needs something closer to $45 an hour. Okay, so do you get 2 construction laborers in your home? You're always piecing it together. And again, this is just the survival budget. So what happens the next time you need brakes? What happens when you need tires? You backslide and you have a really hard time making up that ground. And we see that at the Community Foundation with the increased need at food pantries. These are symptoms of households that are struggling because their housing costs have increased, the utility costs in this region. are some of the highest in the country. So people are accessing food pantries more. They're having a really hard time keeping their shelves stocked. And as you can see, just looking at all of these, out of 57 jobs forecast as high demand, Jocelyn picked out the occupational areas, 35. So it's leaving you with 22 that are pay above $50,000. But in looking at that family of four number, only the top 5 jobs give you enough of an hourly wage to meet those costs. And all of them require a bachelor's degree, which of course introduces now student loan debt into your equation. And just in sort of teeing up Justin a little bit with his presentation, I was looking at another section of our report because one of the biggest shocks to the system in our region during COVID has been the significant increase in the median cost of homes in our region. So since the foundation last published this report, which has been 6 years, so I looked at Kent, and in 2017, the median home value was $344,000. In 2023, it was $567,000. The median household income in Kent right now, $96,000, but the annual income required to spend only 30% of your income to afford that median priced home, you need to be making $207,000. So that just represents an enormous gap. And in looking at these in-demand jobs, you can just see that there is a big gap between the jobs that the market says that they need filled and the cost of housing. So how can we all now intentionally try to create one essential good that people need, housing, at a more affordable cost, something that meets the wages that the vast majority of these jobs, these are the jobs that are available to people. So that's, I don't know how to fix this. From the community foundation side, we do our best to support the organizations that are supporting people in poverty. But again, it's a lot of Band-Aids. It's food to the food pantries, it's subsidies for healthcare, it's subsidies for mental health care. But it's also trying to support organizations like the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity that's working so hard with all the nonprofits in our region who are trying to bring more housing that's affordable to people at all levels of the income scale below 80% of area median income, and especially those at the low and very low wage ends. And so now Justin's project is really exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this comes about.
Terrific. Thanks, Julie. So Justin is going to tell us about how they have been looking into the housing needs of folks who work in Kent.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Potter, the president of Kent Affordable Housing. So we are working on something we're calling the South Common Expansion, and we are working with a surveyor who is also a member of the fire department. And we were just having a conversation about affordable housing and how that worked. And he mentioned to me that the fire department in the past had actually looked into creating some housing because they had a tremendous issue with recruitment and retention there. It's an all volunteer force, and they'd like to keep it that way. And housing was a big issue for them. So we got to talking about that, and then this collaboration grant became available from the Litchfield County Center for Housing Opportunity, and is funded by the Foundation for Community Health. Right about the time we were having that conversation, so I was like, hot dang, we have an opportunity here to move things forward with the fire department. So we quickly put together a grant application and got that funded. So there are multiple aspects of the work we are doing with the fire department. Originally, we had thought that we might pursue something called the HTCC Workforce Housing Funding, which is a special tranche of funding that would be limited to people who live and work in Kent. And we thought about using that to potentially develop a few units of housing for the fire department. So with that in mind, we put together a workforce housing survey for for folks in the town. So that's one aspect. We'll get to it in a second. But in terms of the other aspects that we are working on with the fire department, so the original thought was there's an old building that we thought we could put a few units into, sort of on some. We found that it was on town land, and so it would not be suitable for that. So we were looking into creating a few units of housing for the volunteer firefighters behind the firehouse in an old warehouse space there. And we started meeting in January and it made some very rapid progress towards that. We have some conceptual plans for the units behind the firehouse in a small portion of the old warehouse space. And the fire department has submitted a grant to for the congressionally designated spending to potentially build that housing at some point in time if they choose to move forward with it. But it's very much it's going to be a fire department initiative, and we are just doing our best to move it along for them. So I think there we go. So here's the housing survey for Kent employees and Kent employers. So we put this together in Google Forms, and initially we had just thought about doing it for Kent employees, but then we decided we should also pull employees as employers as well. And we distributed that with forms that we gave to the employers, and we advertised it via Facebook as well. And we received a number of interesting results. Yes. All right, so we had over 90 responses to the workforce housing survey, and the most interesting and sort of startling finding from that survey is that 74% of people who lived and worked in Kent wanted to move sort of ideally within Kent. These are people living in housing situations less than ideal, living with their parents, in-laws, a spouse that they wanted to separate from, all sorts of things. And these are people who work in Kent, love Kent, would love to stay in Kent, but just have an untenable housing situation. And this sort of response that we received sort of corroborates what we've heard from the fire department, which is that folks who've been on the fire department forever, in some cases, have to move to Torrington. They grew up in Kent, they've worked, volunteered for the fire department for in some cases decades, but then their housing situation changes, and they have to move elsewhere, which is a real problem. Another surprising result was that most of the people who responded were from Kent, but I think that's sort of just a result of the way that we advertised the survey, which was largely sort of via Facebook. So it was interesting seeing the difference in the responses from the employees versus the employers in terms of where folks were, because a lot of the employers indicated that folks were traveling long distances for their jobs here. So. And another interesting response was that many of these people who were seeking housing would be interested in applying for housing with the fire department if that were available. So very encouraging for our initiative with the fire department. And so now. And here's some of the responses from various employees.
Yeah, on the right is employee responses, and on the left-hand side is some of the things we heard from employers through the survey. And I guess we don't need to read all of this to you. Again, I think it's nice to both get the data and the data points, but also to hear some of the stories that are really compelling. Again, both from folks who work in jobs in Kent and are in unsustainable housing situations. And then also to just hear directly from employers about how difficult it is for them to attract and retain workers due to the cost of housing. And I just want to note something that Justin and I think this was yesterday, Justin, we're talking about that there is a perception from Kent employers that a lot of the affordable housing that exists in Kent now is not lived in by people who work in Kent. There's a perception of that. And it is true that a lot of the housing that dedicated affordable housing in our communities are lived in by seniors, retired folks, and people that have, needed or wanted to downsize. And one of the things Justin and I were talking about, which I think is important, is we have a really long waiting list because we have such a limited number of dedicated affordable housing units within each of our communities. They have really long waiting lists. So like here in Salisbury, we have 100 households on our waiting list. And so it can take 5 years to get off the waiting list. And I think what happens is a lot of folks, especially younger folks who might be in, say, restaurant jobs or bank jobs, when they hear that the waiting list is 5 years long, they don't even bother getting on it. So I think one of the challenges for us is, again, creating more options, building these new units that are currently underway, and making sure that the folks who work in town know when they come online, and know how to put in an application. And again, if waiting lists are 5 years long, the folks who are going to get in there are people who can wait. Again, seniors that might already live in the community, and again, maybe they're paying 50% or more of their income on housing costs, but they can do that for 3 or 5 years before they get off the waiting list. So Justin, I don't know if you want to say any more about that, but I thought that was kind of an interesting perception from employers in the community.
Yeah, so distributing this survey around the community, we caught an earful from employers about just just how difficult the housing situation is, and it also sort of a bit of frustration about exactly what Jocelyn mentioned. And affordable housing fulfills a number of very important roles, and one of the very important roles is providing downsizing options to our seniors. Our communities are getting a lot older, and these long waiting lists. If you're a senior with a home, you can wait. But as a former young person myself, I would have qualified for this housing. And actually, my mid-20s, I looked into coming out here, and from New York, and I had a business down there, and I really wanted to move back out here, but I realized that the only option was to move in with my parents, and this sort of applying for this sort of housing was not something that I would ever consider, just because of the long waiting list. If you're a young person, for a while you can live with your parents or get a bunch of roommates, but at some point in time you're going to realize that that's just untenable, and you're going to go out and try to find a place of your own, but you're not going to be willing to wait on that list typically.
Right. So again, we need to get these 18 developments that are underway within Litchfield County done. We need to add more of those developments to the pipeline. We do that by, again, supporting our local nonprofit housing organizations to get stuff done. And again, having the conversation within our community that we need these options, both for seniors and for our workforce. And again, changing the perception that affordable housing is not for people who work. It 100% is. We just need to create more options so that they are available to those folks when they need them. So
I would like to add that we have had some success. So the waiting list is not sequential. So we have 64 households on our waiting list, but they are not. It does not open up sequentially. Units are matched according to income and household size. So we've sort of been making that pitch to younger folks and to the general community that the length of the waiting list should not necessarily dissuade you from applying for getting on that waiting list. And we have had a number of young folks move in, including employees of Kent employers. So
agreed. Great, thanks. So we're going to move on and take people's questions, and we have a little less than 15 minutes left in the hour. I just wanted to note really quick before we move on to that, that a lot of the resources that we talked about today, including, again, those short films, previous webinars that we've done, like on short-term rentals, and the new housing needs assessment tool for Litchfield County towns are all on our website, which is cthousingopportunity.org. And then if you go down to the Litchfield County Center, you'll find all of these resources and more. So I just wanted to note that before we move on to questions. So you're welcome to raise your hand if you have questions or put them in the chat. And Dave raised his hand first, so we'll go to him.
Thank you. Justin, I'm really intrigued with the entire Kent Volunteer Fire Department. I think that is great. And I know that you and I have talked before about that. I'm just wondering about some of the nuts and bolts. You would hate to see someone join the fire department just to qualify for the housing. Are they going to require something, a commitment of so many years, so on and so forth? Because we have a number of young people here. As a matter of fact, we're quite fortunate. We just had 5 young people just join our fire department in the last month. The only problem is they're all very young people. They have jobs outside of the town. And I believe all of them live with their parents. So they're, that type of housing would be something that certainly we would be really, at least I would, to get into. But again, what's the nuts and bolts, I guess, is what I'm asking. How do you decide?
Yes, so originally we had discussed having preferences for people who worked at in the fire department, and then we had a conversation with a representative of the Pound Ridge, New York Fire Department, which was able to build their own housing with their own funding, and they have some very tight restrictions on who gets to live in that housing, complete with requirements for serving shifts, having to be qualified to operate all the apparatus, etc. So after hearing that discussion, so we all decided that it would make sense to try to find a funding source that would allow those sorts of restrictions for the people who live in that housing. And so that's why we went from pursuing the HTCC funding and going to the congressionally directed spending funding, which we hope will provide a lot more flexibility to do what the fire department wants to do. And part of the reason for that as well is, so this is fire department property. It's going to be like literally behind the firehouse. So it makes a heck of a lot of sense to make sure that they are fire department members in great standing. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thanks, Dave.
Jocelyn, we have a question in the chat. Someone wanted to know how the Kent surveys were distributed.
Justin, you want to talk about that?
Yes, so we reached out to employers and distributed them that way and via Facebook as well. So this was very much not a scientific survey. It was, whoever took it, took it. And that's why I think we ended up with a lot of responses from people who lived and worked in Kent. We used Facebook, and that was quite successful. But if you're frequenting the Kent community Facebook page, oftentimes you live in Kent. So.
Yeah, but I think you guys did a good job making it available in different ways. I think you handed out a flyer that gave a QR code. So employers could post it somewhere within that their employees or workers could see and use the QR code to take the survey on their phones if they wanted. So I think you guys did a pretty good job getting it out there into the community, and I think you got a pretty good response rate.
Yeah, we did our best, and it produced some very interesting and helpful responses. So.
All right, Michelle?
Hi, I was kind of curious on this affordable housing and rental ideas. Are there any incentives tax-wise for someone to price their rentals in an affordable manner? I know a lot of people are always looking, how much do they need? Obviously, you got to cover the cost of your building and what it takes. And then from there, your profit. But are there any incentives, tax deductions or anything out there that encourages people to have a more lower rate than the higher rates?
The simple answer to that question is no. There
Okay,
are
I figured.
no tax incentives currently that I know of. But Justin has some ideas on this topic.
Yeah, so so in the Connecticut state statutes, they have a menu of tax abatements that towns can provide to to taxpayers if they want to, and there actually is one in there for housing, but it seems like the restrictions are very tight in terms of what it needs to be. It seems like it would probably have to be like a 40-year restriction on the unit. So I'm not sure if any towns have actually, implemented that, and if it's available to individual homeowners, but it's a great idea.
So
Yeah,
it
I don't
sounds
know
like,
any towns that have opted into that. Again, you have to
Right.
opt into that option. And we talk about it a lot in the context of accessory dwelling units or accessory apartments, and how can we, again, incentivize folks to rent those affordably. And as Justin says, right now, it's sort of requires homeowners to deed restrict for a long-term period. Again, 40 years sounds right to me, in order to qualify. And most homeowners do not want to deed restrict their property for 40 years. So that is a barrier currently to that kind of incentive.
so is that something that as a group and towns and what that we should be looking to lobby our state and fed peoples for more help in that area, so it's not a town by town? I know like ADUs became, we need to allow them by right because of the state, and there's been some state shifts and things. I'm just wondering what we can do as a group to push our state leaders. I know some might be headed that way. And be able to get this to not be a town by town.
Yeah, I mean, my response to that, and obviously Julie and Justin, if you want to respond, you're welcome to as well. But I think property tax abatements are difficult and tricky. I don't think it could be a tool in the toolkit.
But it didn't even have to be property tax abatement. I mean, it could be an income tax deduction in some way, because as a property owner, if you're taking in less rent, you're making
Yeah.
a less profit, obviously. So that's going to kind of balance. But it seems like there could be a way we could attach it that it's not property tax driven, because our towns have to have that property tax or we can't provide our services. And I know that's why
Right.
towns don't opt into it. So I just
Yeah.
wonder if in a different approach through income or some kind of assistance in that way, we could be also opening up another pathway.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think we should look into what makes sense from that perspective, for that to be a tool, again, in our toolkit of ways to create some more housing options that are affordable for our workforce and seniors. And also, I just want to say that those kind of decentralized ways of creating affordable housing are good and nice, but they're not efficient. I mean, I think they should be a tool in the toolkit, but we also need to just create more affordable rental housing and affordable multifamily rental housing so that they are available. Again, we can get people off the waiting list, and relying on homeowners in our communities to become landlords. That will happen and does happen for a small portion of folks, but that isn't going to solve. And I know you're not trying to solve the affordable housing challenge in one go, but I just wanted to say, I think it is important and I think we should look into it, but I do feel like it's a niche kind of program. And so we also need to be thinking about supporting all of the other ways that we can create, these housing options. again, like supporting our local housing nonprofits to build multifamily rentals that are dedicated, affordable. But thank you for your question, and we can keep looking into those options and how we can support them as well.
Yeah,
Jocelyn, we
because
have a couple of questions in the chat in the next 3 minutes. They're coming in.
I was just going to say real quick, I mean, because right now the only thing we can do is support people to get into these units. For example, there are, security deposit assistance, security deposit guarantees, down payment assistance, but they haven't tackled it from the other side of the equation yet from the homeowner perspective. But there's a bunch of ideas that could be discussed for sure.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, so someone asked, would anyone like to comment on the proper role of town government in regard to solving the housing problems?
Well, I guess I definitely see town leaders like Dave and others coming to webinars like this and educating themselves about both the challenges and the solutions. And so I think the appropriate role of our town leaders is to do that, to educate themselves, to be able to have the conversation in the community about how we need this and who we need it for within our communities, and what the solutions are that we can achieve in our communities, and then supporting their local housing nonprofits, or potentially helping to create one if there isn't a local housing nonprofit in their communities. And again, I think if towns have a housing plan, most towns do, especially in Litchfield County, have an affordable housing plan. Make sure it gets implemented. Make sure you have at least an annual meeting once a year to look at your affordable housing plan and the strategies, and figure out what strategy you're going to implement this year. So those are the ways that I see towns in our region playing a role in helping to solve some of our affordable housing challenges. And I certainly appreciate folks like Dave and others. I can't see everybody else, but I'm sure some others are on coming and proactively doing that.
There are more questions coming in. I don't know if we want to stay on and take them.
We can take one more.
Well, one, we might have to look into an email. Someone asked about the statute number for the 40-year deed restriction that I believe Justin, so maybe we can email about that. And then expanding on the 10-year period that's mentioned in some affordable housing related statute. I'm not sure if that's the 830G moratorium that's referred to.
The 10-year
period that is mentioned in some affordable housing related statute.
I don't know about that, but again, I will say, if you guys have, again, in light of the fact that it's 1 o'clock and we don't want to keep people too long, obviously feel free to reach out to me if you have questions after this. And if they're for Julie or Justin, I will make sure that they get them. We do appreciate everyone's time today, and we will post the recording of this webinar on our website if you want to share it with anyone. So thank you for coming. Thanks to Julie and Justin for joining us and presenting, and have a lovely Thursday.
And Justin just shared a link to that statute that I posted.
Terrific. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.